Good morning, everybody. This is Pastor Tom. Welcoming you to another study in the Word. Of course, it may be noontime where you're at, or even evening. So whatever it is, good whatever it is. And we're here today to share with you. I think it's our second that we're doing in our series. We're calling Principles or Keys to Success. So many things we could talk about, but I chose to start this particular series in 2 Timothy chapter 2. So if you could go over there. Our goal today would be to strengthen you to become the strongest you can be in Christ, or the strongest Christian. These principles that we're talking about here will develop you, and when they're applied, will make you an outstanding believer, person, uh, business person, minister. You could just go down the line, and because these are principles of God's Word that will are forever etched in I guess you could say, the excellence of God. So we want to be excellent people, and we want you to be excellent. So let's start off there in 2 Timothy chapter 2. Let's read. We already studied here in our first session on verse 1. You therefore, my son, be strong in the grace that is in Christ Jesus, and the things that you have heard with me among many witnesses, commit these to faithful men who will be able to teach others. So we talked about that last time. Now we're going to talk about the next thing he mentions here. You therefore, now he's speaking to Timothy, he's speaking to a young man, he's speaking to a young preacher, but you could be speaking to a young Christian. You could be speaking to a young business person. You could be speaking to anybody um, that really is striving to be as excellent as they can be in the kingdom of God. And he says to that person, you therefore must endure hardship as a good soldier of Jesus Christ. Really interesting. So he uses the illustration of a soldier and the hardships of a soldier. One of the things that I always tell young Christians is especially when you first get saved, filled with the Holy Spirit, there's a season there of normally of what I almost call, you're just caught up in the presence and the power of God, to the point to where it seems like just everything is so good and everything is so peaceful that there can never be any hardship that comes your way. But eventually there will be, and eventually that's life. And all of us will have to face hardship. Um, and there's hardships that come in every realm of life. Some people, maybe they're facing a hardship financially, maybe in their marriage, maybe with their children, maybe in a relationship, maybe at church, maybe at their job, maybe they're out of work. Maybe there's a sickness and disease trying to attack your physical body, or you're going through things like that. Just could be 1,000 different things. Life can be difficult and hard at times. And the soldier, though, it's really interesting. He uses the illustration of the soldier. I remember my father was a World War II veteran, and he used to tell me some things about being a soldier. He was in the Navy, and he in California. I can't remember the name exactly of the place out there, but it's in Central California, where they still have a place where the Navy people and Army people and stuff were trained, and that's where he was for his boot camp. I remember him telling me about the boot camp. Boot camp reminded me a little bit when he told me about football. When I started playing football in California in high school, I never experienced anything quite like that, because we would go out there, and it was quite hot in California, anywhere from 90 to 100 degrees or more in September when we would start football practice. And man, I mean, they were not so politically correct back then. There wasn't the rules they have today. They, have rules about these things nowadays, and I think some of them are good, some of them probably aren't good. But the truth of the matter is that it was a difficult and challenging thing. You may say, well, it's just football. Yeah, but let's just say the first day I was in a large high school. The first day, you might have 100 people come out for practice, and then there was the running. You put these pads on, and there's the running and the running and the running and the more running, and you're losing your lunch and sweating. And then there's the hitting. I mean, full blast hitting, running and hitting into other people, and the exercise over and over. the tremendous physical stress that puts on you. And not only do you do it once in a day, you do it twice in a day. They call it 2 days, but we used to do it sometimes 3 times a day, believe it or not. And it was hellish. By the end of the first few days, that thing had thinned down to about over half the people. They just couldn't float with that. And you see, that was hard. It was very hard. And then as you went through that, finally your body started getting into shape. The pain started leaving your body after a week or two, and then and all of a sudden you found yourself being able to do. Now listen, being able to do far more than you really thought you ever could when you started. The same way with a soldier. The soldier starts out in boot camp, and they are just absolutely. They work them out. They wake them up. It's really a little bit of brainwashing is what it is. They sleep deprive them. They don't feed them properly. They feed them just enough to thin them down, and they get them into not top shape, and they learn how yes sir, no sir. You see, there's none of this rebellion that you see. That if you have any rebellion in you, in boot camp, normally they weed that out, okay, and you become submissive, and you learn that when somebody gives you an order that's above you, you follow that order immediately, or you're going to end up in the brig. There's consequences. Either that, or you're going to do KP duty. You're gonna have to go clean the heads with a toothbrush, or you're gonna have to do something, maybe run, or make all of your sidekicks there have to run, and that's no fun going back to the barracks alone with the sidekicks after you made them run an extra 10 miles because of your rebellious activity. So all of that's weeded out of you, and these are hardships that soldiers and the hardships that we had when we were playing sports. He's going to bring that up in a minute. um, those are hardships that when you're going through it, it hurts. It's difficult. My dad told me, man, I hated it. I hated having to go through that. But I noticed as a football player, as an example, when I got out on the football field, and we had been whipped into shape. We were normally in shape better than the other team was. So at the end of the game, the last quarter or something, that equivaled to a lot of wins because they were winded. They couldn't. They were so tired, but we were still doing good and strong, and we could push them around pretty good at that point, and that could bring a lot of wins for you. In as a soldier boot camp, my dad told me, he said, when I got into battles, I was very thankful for what I learned because they're shooting bullets at you. Bombs are hitting all around. My dad's ship got sunk. He got twice got sunk by kamikazes. Those experiences he endured, and they were difficult and challenging. But he was thankful for his training when he got into battle. And that's what the point I'm trying to make. When you're God will take all Christians through boot camp. If you really want to serve God, especially if you're going into ministry, you're going to go through some boot camp. I remember Norval Hayes. He's still alive. Norval's still kicking somewhere, and he's still preaching somewhere today. I think he's almost 90 years old now. But he wrote a book. I don't know if it's still in print, but I really liked it. It's called God's Boot Camp. And he talked about hardships and the things that you go through. If you really want to serve God, you're going to go through some boot camp. And there's hard things. But he says, you therefore must. It's a must. Must, folks. We must endure. In other words, you don't give up. You have to learn not to quit. So many people quit along the way in football. Many people, I was watching a program. I hope I'm not boring you, but I was watching a program on TV here I really liked. It was about the Navy SEALs, or maybe it was about the Army Rangers. I can't remember, one of those elite groups, the Green Berets, somebody, and how only a few people got chosen in the first place, really, out of a vast bunch of people that applied. But when they got in there, just a few of them really remained at the end. Only a few of them could endure that way. And so he says, as Christians, we've got to endure hardship as a good soldier. Amen. We can't wimp out along the way somewhere, and we've got to learn that even though there will be some very difficult times, we with Jesus Christ can endure. And then it goes on and says, no one engaged in warfare entangles himself with the affairs of this life, that he may please him who enlisted him as a soldier. So when somebody becomes a soldier, really there's a whole new set of rules. They're not just an American anymore. People don't realize this today, but once you become a soldier, as an example, in the Army has its own set of laws, rules, and regulations, and you go by them. When you're with them, you go by them. And one of the things is he says here, as Christians, we're engaged in warfare. We can't entangle ourselves with the affairs of life. Now, what that means is it's not saying you're not going to have to deal with the affairs of life. Of course, you will. All of us have to deal, with the affairs of life, but we can't entangle ourselves. We can't get ourselves all caught up in it to the point to where we forget about what's important, which is being a Christian, staying the course, doing our warfare, being strong in prayer, being strong in faith. These are the things that we need to focus on. And we also, one of the things you learn that I always appreciated about sports, one of the things I learned that I always appreciated about the military people is you learn discipline. You learn what is important, your priorities are important, and discipline's important. So for a Christian, our priorities must be in order. And so we need to learn that. We need to learn that prayer is a priority. We need to learn that Bible study is a priority. We need to learn that the spiritual things that we do for our own benefit and our children and our families is important. We need to remember that church is very important. We need to keep our priorities going the right way, because once we change priorities, that's when we start getting into trouble, when we start not pleasing him who enlisted us as a soldier. And then it goes on and says, and also, if anyone competes in athletics, he's not crowned unless he competes according to the rules. Okay, there you go. There's that discipline again. Um, I talk a little bit about athletics, but athletics all have rules. If you break the rules in a race, as an example, you might be out front in the race, but if you break the rules to get there, you're out. Okay, many people in the Olympics, as you have seen over the years, have been caught doping or caught taking steroids. They're out. They lost their prestige. They lost their gold medals. I mean, if you get caught cheating, you're out. And so that's the way it is here. We know there's certain rules we have to go by. There's certain things that we must do. And then, and then he goes on and he switches over from the athlete to the hardworking farmer. Really interesting. He uses these three illustrations to talk about hard work. The hardworking farmer must be first to partake of the crops. Consider what I say, and may the Lord give you understanding in all these things. So it's hard work being a farmer. Farmers have to know when to plant, they have to know when to plow, have to know when to harvest, they have to know when to get up, they have to milk the cows, whatever. And it's difficult work. All three of those are illustrations you can use. But the bottom line on these is he talks about hardships, he talks about hard work, he talks about diligence. And one of the things that I've learned over the years, and I want to stop and talk about that for a minute to finish what we're talking about here, is that we need to understand as Christians, and you need to understand as a worker, wherever you may work, whether it be at church, whether it be at business, whether you have a business, whatever it may be, is that one of the principles of prosperity. And I don't like to just talk about this all the time because it should be apparent, but it's hard work. It's learning to be a hard worker. And one of the things that I've learned over the years, when I was in secular work and as well now as in spiritual work for now more than many years now, um, is that people do not have a good work ethic, many of them. And this is very sad because every Christian should have a strong work ethic. Now, I had the advantage of growing up in a household where my mom and my dad were, World War II. My dad was a World War II veteran, like I was talking about, and they were Depression kids, okay? And when you were Depression kids, you got up in the morning. Both of them lived on a farm in a little town in Idaho. And when they were kids, and we're talking as soon as they could work, they had to go out, and in the morning they had to get up early. They had to go out and had to work and work and work, because the only way they ate is if they worked, because depression was very difficult. And my grandparents, many times spent a lot of time on that farm. Not a big farm. It was a small dairy farm, is my mother's anyway, and my father's was small too. They, if they did not get out there and get at it, they weren't going to eat. Now, but they did. They never went without food because they had the ability to get their own food. In fact, on Sundays, when after church and stuff happened out there, wherever they were, people would actually come to their place out there. They would invite many people and they would give them a nice meal because they had the ability, because they had the cows and the cattle to slaughter, and they had the great big garden. My grandma had this huge garden. They had chickens. I remember, as always used to get those farm fresh eggs. They had the means to all of that, and so they would feed people sometimes on Sundays. But my grandma and grandpa never had any money, but they could always provide enough to eat. And but it was a difficult and challenging job, hard work. My parents learned the value of hard work from and so they installed in us that. We watched them. I watched my dad how hard he worked to become go up as high as he could in his company. My mother was amazing. I tell you what, I don't know how she did it. My mother would always have a full-time job. Now back then, most people were just homemakers, but my mother liked to work. And now she never neglected us though. Here's the amazing thing about my mother. She would get up in the morning somehow, I don't know how early it was, and do all the housework. We would always have a good breakfast. We were out the door to school, made sure we got to school, and she would go to work. And she'd work all day, but she'd get off normally, sometimes not, but normally before we got home or around the same time. When she came home, we always had a lunch to take with us. I left that out, but we always had a good meal at night. She cleaned the house and hold down that job. The house was spotless. And she didn't just cook with a microwave oven. She didn't just throw something in or bring home a Kentucky Fried Chicken or a pizza. She made us meals, literally, almost. There were times where we went out and times we had pizza, but almost every single night. And we're not talking about um, just something thrown together and heated up. We're talking about nice, good, solid meals. My mother was a great cook. She learned that from my grandmother. My grandmother was the same way. When we would all of us cousins would come to a small little house. A house couldn't have been more than, I thought back on this many times. I don't know if that house was more than 1,000 square foot at the most. I don't know how we all got in there, but we had three families. Let's see, wait, four families sometimes, and they had kids, a couple kids each, and everybody slept in there, and everybody had a play, and we stayed there for sometimes weeks, and out on the farm. And I tell you what, my grandmother always had breakfast, the best breakfast you ever had. You remember, I don't know if any of you remember these type of breakfasts, but you come out there for farm fresh eggs. She'd have the potatoes right out of the garden. And those potatoes, you can't beat those with cream sauce. And she would make the potatoes with cream sauce, and then she'd have those peas in there. Oh my God. Just thinking about it, you'd have farm fresh ham, sausage, eggs, bacon, pancakes. I mean, the whole 9 yards every single morning. Then when you come back for lunch, it was the same thing. It was awesome. It was amazing. Then she would have a smaller dinner. They didn't eat as much at night as we do normally today, and probably was a good thing. But I'm here to tell you, she always had cookies. She always had baked goods. She always had pies. She did it all herself. It was incredible. The house was always clean. I don't know how she did, but they had learned how to work. Not only did they learn how to work hard, they learned how to work smart. And I'm here to tell you, this work ethic that we have in America today is not good. People want something for nothing. They do not want to learn how to work. But if you do learn how to work, here's the good news. If you do learn how to work and you have a good work ethic and you learn to endure hardness and you learn to overcome what other people can out here, you will stand out and you will get promoted. I remember when I first took my first secular job Uh, my first secular job in life was picking strawberries in the fields, and most of my friends were Hispanic, and I learned how to pick other berries. My dad would get me jobs in the agriculture, but I didn't start out. I started out in the bottom a part of that, and I learned how to work hard if I wanted to make money, because you get paid by however much you pick, and it was not very much. I worked at a uh, I think they call them drive-in theaters now. They don't have those much, but back then we did. And on the weekends, I made $1.38 an hour. I remember that specifically, $1.38 an hour. But I did get in the movies free, so that was worth it. But anyway, that's where it was back then, and we learned those principles. So later on, I never was out of work. You know, even during a very bad recession during the Carter years back in the 70s, I remember how bad it was. But I always had a job. I would just look till I got one, and I'd take whatever I could. I could have took unemployment, and but if I did take unemployment, it was only a week or two, and I had another job, because I just could not sit around doing nothing, even in the rebellious days, even in the partying days. I mean, I go out all night. I still show up for work on time, and I got to tell you, that was embedded in me by my parents, and it paid off. I remember when one time I got hired by a company named AAA Insurance Company to be a claims adjuster, and I didn't go there to be a claims adjuster. I went there to be a salesperson. I wanted to be a salesperson, because I mean, you get that job, you got it made, you know. But there was none of those. But so I went in and I sat down. I just walked in. I remember walking into the office. I was all dressed up in my suit and tie and everything, because if you want a job, you better do that, you know. And you need to look sharp, sharper than sharp. And when I walked in there, I just walked right down the hall, and I walked into this guy's office. I didn't know who he was, but I knew he was one of the bosses there. And I said, "Sir, I was wondering if I might apply for a sales job here." And the guy kind of laughed and chuckled, because I didn't have an appointment. He said, "Sit down for a second." I sat down, and he started talking to me a little bit. He says, "Well, we don't have any sales jobs available, but maybe we have would you be interested in a claims job?" Well, I didn't have a job. I was looking for a job, a claims adjuster job. And I said, "Yeah, sure, I could do that. You know, I think that'd be interesting." And he says, "Wait a second." He called down to another guy. So I went down there, and I got in his office, and he sat down and he started talking to me. And we talked for a while, and he asked me about, you know, my education, this thing, that thing, the other thing. And he said, "Mr." He said, "You know," he said, "Tom," he said, "you know, you don't have a total college education." I said, "No, I I didn't get my degree. I went to some college." He said, "Well, we can't hire anybody who doesn't have a college education for this job. It's just our policy." And I said, "Oh, that's a shame." And he said, but he said, "Let me," he said, "Give me your phone number," and so forth. I said, "Okay." He says, "I really like you, and I'll give you a call one way or the other." So anyway, I get this call, and he says, "Will you come back down?" And I'm thinking, "Oh, I can't get this job. I don't have college education." I go back down there, and there's a bunch of people sitting in the room. So I went through this whole thing and answered all these questions, and just question after question, and they're asking me these questions, and I just sat there calmly, you know, like I do in interviews, and I answered the question, looked them in the eye, straight shoot them, was honest, and they said, "Okay, thank you, we'll call you," and I left, and then they called me back. I think I went through that about 5 times. I kid you not. Different people were sitting in there and everything. Finally, I come back there, and they're all sitting in this office at this time. They took the time to sit me in this office, you know. And I'm sitting there, I'm looking around, and they're looking at me, and they said, "Well, Mr. Terry, you know, or Tom, we don't normally do. We're breaking protocol. We're breaking really our rules, but we've decided to go ahead and hire you." I said, "Oh, fantastic! I won't let you down, you know." And they hired me. And I'll tell you what, to be able to do this job, you had to go to school in San Francisco for a week, right? So they send me to school in San Francisco. Well, I didn't know. Nobody had told me that I needed to learn how. I had to learn how to type to have this job. I didn't know how to type, and the job, all of taking the claims was on a computer. You know, they're using computers at that time, starting to use computers, and I mean, I had to learn how to type in that class with nobody showing me. I had to fake it to get it through it. I had to one finger it, you know, fast enough to get through it, and it was amazing. But you know, I began to. At first, I was really slow, because I lacked the skills that I really needed. A lot of these were girls. A lot of them were guys that had a lot of education, could type, they knew about all this stuff, and I didn't. But one thing I knew how to do was work hard. Another thing I knew how to do was work good with people. I had those two things going for me, and I began to throw myself into it. And when I got there, there was these great big piles. Everybody had these big piles of folders all over their desks, you know. And man, it was just like everybody had that. And I go, oh, this must. And when I got to my desk, who I had taken over for, I had these files sitting all over my desk and all up with this backed up work. And we did all kinds of things. We took claims. We had to take a certain amount of claims every day, you know. And when people would come in, we had to process the claims. We had to take pictures of the cars. We had to do all this stuff. We had to work with when they got fixed, bickering with the place that fixed the cars, you know, to get to us, you know, less price on what we did. We worked with them to come to a you know, agreement. It was fun. And then we had to do all this back paperwork. And then one of the things we had to do is collect people who had run out on their things. They owed money. People who didn't have insurance, we had to try to go after them. You know, we had to try to get money from them. So that was part of our job, and it was all interesting. And I got better and better. After about 3 or 4 months, I had my desk was completely empty. I had everything filed neatly. I was way ahead of the game. And I'm sitting there one day, and it was boring because I didn't have much to do. Now you have to understand, I've been there about 3 or 4 months. And I looked around, and all my coworkers had these big stacks still on their desk. So I thought, what I'm going to do, I just went over and I said, hey, I'll run through this for you. I took a pile, I take it over to my desk, I run through it for them. Pretty soon I started getting the stacks off all the other desks. Now, you see, I'm only telling you this not to brag. I'm telling you this because I want you to know hard work, learning to be disciplined that way, really pays off. And I'll tell you why. There was people sitting next to me in that office that had been there for 20 years, 15 years, 10 years. They got raises, okay? They got raises, but they never got promotions. And some of these people were sharp people. But I noticed at breaks and stuff and different times, they were, you know, they were just constantly talking and, you know, making, you know, they weren't working. They weren't focused. A lot of the time they weren't focused. They were doing something else. And I focused, man. Not that I wasn't friendly, but I focused when I was working. And all of a sudden, one day, I get called into my boss's office, my supervisor's office. And my supervisor said, you know, we've been watching you. We really liked how you work. And this was my review, you know. We're going to give you a raise, but we also wanted to know if you were interested in being a homeowner's adjuster instead of a car adjuster. And I said, what does that entail? Well, it's almost like having your own business. You'll give you your own office over here, and then you will give you a car allowance for your car, and then you just go do these claims, and you kind of run it yourself. I go, hey, that sounds good, because I was in this office with all these people, you know, around and everything. So I got this job, and I got promoted. Well, that didn't go over real big with some of those other people that'd been there for years. And here I was, 4 months, I got promoted. And I did that for about like, a year, I was there for a year, maybe a little over that. Really liked it. It was fun. And then all of a sudden she calls me in again. So I go in there and she goes, listen, she goes, um, this is unusual. She says, but the people above, whoever that was, they want you to come and they want you to be in management. Now you have to understand something. Management there, many people, nobody, very rarely got into management. It was hard to get there. You had to be one of the been there for a long time normally, and you had to have some gray hair normally, and you had to be one of their best workers and somebody who knew the business. I mean, only a year, a little over a year I'd been there, and they wanted to take me up to San Francisco, train me as a manager, and give me, my own office to manage, and good money. But I couldn't do it because I knew I was going to be in ministry. So I had to turn them down, and I had to go another way. But that goes to show you, and I could tell you a lot over the years of how just learning a hard work, disciplined lifestyle that he talks about here in 2 Timothy, the disciplined lifestyle of an athlete, the disciplined lifestyle of the soldier or the farmer. And I got to tell you, even today, I've got my own ministry here. and that God has given me and I oversee. And but I'm not lazy. I probably do more teaching now than I ever have in my life. I do it on YouTube like this, and I could not do it. Woe unto me if I don't preach the gospel, but woe unto me if I don't work. I'm not going to sit around and do nothing all day. I've never been like that. I can't be like that. But I have noticed preachers over the years, here and there, that were lazy. And a lot of them could be much more successful, give much more to the people if they just learned to work. And I have noticed many, many people that I've hired, because I got to hire people. I didn't talk about that later on in some of my secular jobs. It is difficult to find somebody that's good with people and somebody that works hard like that and is on time. The small things that we think are not important are many times very important to your employees, employers, or your own business. Well, I run out of time. This is a key to success, though, and I wanted to make sure I covered it because you need to know that. Now, I want you to go away from here today thinking, how can I improve myself in this area? And if you'll do that and really make some changes, I think it will really benefit your life. No matter where you work, no matter what you're doing, if you can learn how to be the very best person there, you'll find that if in fact you cannot go any further there, God will take you and He'll give you something even more better, and He'll promote you, even if you lack education. This is one of the keys of prosperity, so to speak. Anyway. I want you to go over to my website, if you will, faithalifefellowship.org. Please go over there. We have many really great seminars. You just push the media button when you go over there, and you can go to our YouTube pages and pray about becoming a partner with us, if you will, because we appreciate all of you that are partnering with us. If you enjoy this and you got something out of this, share this, because this is important information. What I'm sharing with you right now may not sound all that spiritual, but it really is. And this is one of the things that people need to know. It's a key to success. Anyway, when you go to faithalifefellowship.org, which is our website, faithalifefellowship.org, excuse me, you can hop over to our YouTube and our Facebook and all of that. But you can also include your prayer requests, and we'll pray with you. Until next time, this is Pastor Tom. Remember this: feed your faith, starve your doubts to death. God bless you.